Common topics in my counseling office are resentment and forgiveness. I spend my days listening to people tell me how they've been wronged by their spouses, their parents, their friends, their coworkers, and others. And the closer they are in relationship to that person, the more it hurts. Is it wrong to hold a grudge? How could we possibly ever forgive someone who has done something awful? Should we forgive them? How do we forgive them? What if we never want to talk to them again? How can we free ourselves from that pain and move forward? All of this and more on today's episode of Unhindered. In the movie Wild, Cheryl Strayed, played by Reese Witherspoon, without any hiking experience, sets out to hike the 1,100-mile Pacific Crest Trail by herself on a journey of self-discovery and a goal to heal from the loss of her mother. She's bringing a lot of baggage along, both physically and metaphorically, and she refers to her incredibly heavy backpack as Monster. And just like the woman in this movie, we often lug around things that aren't serving us well and do nothing but weigh us down and keep us from reaching our destination. At one point in the movie, she realized that she was averaging 5 to 7 miles per day, while the other hikers were averaging 20 miles per day because of the weight of her backpack. And at this rate, she would never make it to her destination. How about you? What are you lugging around? Do you have a backpack named Monster? You can have your backpack, or you can have peace, but you can't have both. If you try to walk through life carrying your backpack full of resentment, you won't get far because there's a real cost to toting around things that you should be letting go of. Most people have some level of resentment towards someone else. Maybe they have said or done something that stung a little. Or maybe there have been experiences in your history that have caused you great pain and are just really hard for you to let go of and forgive. Maybe for you, that's an understatement. Maybe it feels downright impossible or terrifying to let go of those things. I've been there. I understand. I've been deeply wounded by people in my life, close people, family members, people who were supposed to love me and care for me. Regardless of how grievous the offense was, forgiveness is something that we need to look at if we want to walk unhindered. The first thing that you need to understand about forgiveness is that it's different than reconciliation. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you have to talk to them, be around them, see them, have a relationship with them. You could choose to, or you can choose not to. You can choose not to have a relationship with someone, even though and still have really forgiven them. Not having a relationship with them is not an indication that you didn't forgive. For example, you can forgive someone who has died. Maybe they hurt you in the past and now they're dead, and you were holding on to a lot of bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness. And you come to a point where you forgive them. You won't be reconciling, at least not in this side of heaven. You could forgive, let's say you were molested as a child. You will want to work through a process of forgiving the perpetrator, but you're not going to have a relationship with them, likely. Not going to reconcile, and that's okay. What about if it's your spouse? Well, in that case, I'm going to assume that reconciliation is the goal. Because if you intend to stay married, then you will have to reconcile in that particular situation. Here's a tough question for you. Should we forgive someone who hasn't admitted they're wrong, hasn't apologized, or hasn't changed? The answer is yes. Because if you keep waiting for them to make it right, then they have all the power. And your healing is completely dependent on their actions. And that's not a good place to be. Our need for fairness makes us resistant to the idea of forgiveness. We like receiving forgiveness, but we don't really like giving it, especially if we've been deeply hurt. Now, if you are a Christ follower, you have a special understanding of what forgiveness means because you have been forgiven much. And so you have no right to not forgive someone else. If you're not a Christian, this concept might prove particularly difficult for you. But regardless of your beliefs, forgiveness is necessary for you to move forward. For Christians, it's necessary because we're commanded to do it. But for everyone, Christian or not, there are two big reasons why forgiveness is necessary. The first one is forgiveness is necessary for your physical and mental well being. Research has demonstrated that forgiveness lowers your risk of heart disease. It lowers your risk for a heart attack. It improves your sleep. It improves your immune system functioning. It can improve or get rid of anxiety and depression. It reduces pain. There's a lot of positive effects to letting go of the past. If you aren't feeling physically well, maybe you have poor sleep or you have digestive issues or anxiety or chronic pain, it's quite possible that the bitterness you're holding on to is actually causing those problems. And you may have never thought of that before. So forgiveness is something that is essential no matter what. It is for you. You are forgiving the other person for your own benefit. And also learning how to forgive hard things is going to benefit you in life and make you a better, stronger, more expanded version of yourself anyway. I'm sure you've heard the saying that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It really is harming you in the end. And the second reason to forgive would be if you want to preserve that relationship with that person or you want to heal the relationship with that person, which maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it will be necessary to forgive that person if you want to have a good relationship with them. I can attest that when it comes to marriage, holding on to resentment will cause it to slowly disintegrate because unforgiveness will taint every component necessary for a happy relationship. Carrying the burden of resentment, that's tough, right? It means that you play it over and over in your mind what they did. How could they have been so cold? How could they have been so heartless? How could they have done this or that? You think about it when you're driving in your car. You think about it when you're taking a shower. You think about it when you lie in bed at night and it's quiet and you can't fall asleep. You rehash it over dinner and drinks with your friends, and it ruins your mood over and over again. If you are stuck in your woundedness, that's a tormenting place to be. Remembering all the careless words, remembering all the hurtful things, just ruminating, playing it over and over and over in your mind. And our enemy, Satan, would love for you to stay stuck there, for to set up camp in those thoughts and dwell on all the ways that you've been wronged. That's because he understands that whatever consumes us controls us. Do you really want to be consumed and ruled by the pain of your past? Or do you want freedom from the past, even if it's risky? You have every right to hold on to that offense. It was wrong. And no one is saying that you aren't entitled to your hurt and angry feelings because you are. The fact that there is resentment, that you have resentment, that there's something to forgive means that something wrong was done. You were wounded, or else there would be nothing to forgive. You were wronged. Take it to the grave with you. But what will you profit from doing that? You can have your backpack, or you can have peace, but you can't have both. When it comes to the topic of forgiveness, usually in counseling, I have to talk to people about what forgiveness is and what it is not. And once I do that, it seems to open the door for them to be willing to forgive. And so I want to do that with you today. So forgiveness is purposely and intentionally making a decision, making a choice to let go of feelings of resentment toward another person and to let go of the need for revenge toward another person. It means you are actively choosing to no longer dwell on it, not to seek revenge, not to wish them any harm. And it's a grace, it's a mercy, it's something you do not because they deserve it, not because they've changed, not because they've apologized, although maybe they have done those things. But even if they haven't, it doesn't matter because it's a grace. It's something you give even though they don't deserve it. It's a mercy that you are showing. Forgiveness is a decision that you make, and you choose to walk it out every hour of every day. In other words, the hurt doesn't need to be gone before you move on. It probably won't be. It's more a mindset. It's like your mind is postured in a way that you are moving forward, that you are, I sometimes will use a physical example, like pick up this little fake plant and I'll say, this is all of your resentment. Take an object and say, this is all of my resentment. This is all of the hurt from the past. And then walk outside and go set this outside. Leave it in the yard and go back in your house. That is a picture of what it means to forgive. You are taking it and you are leaving it behind. You are leaving it in the past. Whenever you think about this little plant, it's still going to hurt. We'll get to that in a second. Let me just say what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness does not diminish what you've experienced or take away the gravity of it. And I think sometimes people think, well, if I forgive, then I'm just saying that it like wasn't a big deal. And it is. It is a big deal. And I want to make sure that they know that. I want to make sure that everybody knows that this was a really big deal. It changed me. It hurt me. It affects me. And I say, if it hurts you badly, then it is a big deal. It's serious. Forgiving someone does not mean that it didn't hurt you badly. It doesn't mean that you take it lightly. I know that you want that other person to see the big gaping wound inside of you. You want them to see how their actions have scarred you, how it affects so much of you, how it has changed you. I know, I really know. By asking you to forgive, I am not taking what's happened to you lightly. I have wounds too. You can hold on to that bitterness forever to make your point, but you don't have to. Just tell them. Tell them how it hurt you. Maybe they'll get it. Maybe they won't. But you don't have to rub it in forever to make sure that they understand. I know it seems like that's going to make it better, but we all know that doesn't work. In fact, it really just makes it worse. Forgiveness does not mean that it won't hurt anymore. The pain of the offense might last forever. People have done things to me that when I think about them, it's always going to hurt. It doesn't mean that I haven't forgiven. In most cases, even after you've completely forgiven someone, the pain will still be present if you allow yourself to think back on it. When it comes to your mind, you'll be like, "Ooh, yeah, I remember that. I remember how hurtful that was." But the goal is that you'll think about it less and less and less until you're rarely ever thinking about it, and therefore you're not living in your woundedness anymore. Forgiveness does not mean that what the person did to you was okay. I covered that, but it also doesn't mean that you give them permission to do it again. Some people feel like, well, I have to hold on to this so that I can make sure they don't do it again. That's self-protection, but you're not actually keeping them from doing it again. By the way, if it were okay and you had permission to do it again, there would be nothing to forgive, right? The fact that there is something to forgive means that something was done that is not okay. And holding on to it is not really going to keep them from not doing it again. You don't have that much power. You don't have that much control. But the grudge gives you this false sense of control, and you're afraid of letting go because you're afraid if you let go of it, it's going to result in an encore of that hurt. And forgiveness does not mean that you won't remember it anymore. We hear the phrase forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. Oh, well, I haven't forgotten, so that means I haven't forgiven. You're not going to get amnesia. People often get forgive and forget from the Bible, and God says, I will remember, I've forgiven you, and I will remember your sins no more. But that root word for remember means remembering something. So I like to picture like a Barbie doll with her arm broken off, and the arm is the sin, the arm is the hurt, the arm is that pain that the person caused. And when God says, I will remember your sins no more, he does not mean that he doesn't know what happened. He does not mean that he got amnesia. He is omniscient. He knows everything. What he means is he will never take that sin and remember it to you. He's never going to connect it back to you. It is as far as the east is from the west. It is sitting out in the yard, no longer in your home. Okay. So if you want to forgive and forget, all your meaning is you're not going to reconnect that offense to the person again. You're not going to bring it up next time you're in an argument with them. You're not going to keep holding it against them. because then you would be remembering it to them. So you're going to remember it. But when you do, you're also going to remember that you made a decision to leave that out in the yard. You made a decision to leave that in the past. And you're going to choose again and again and again to take that thought captive and say, no, I already let that go. No, I've already left that in the past. And that is where it is going to stay. I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm not going to talk about it to others. I'm not going to ruminate it on it. It is the past. And lastly, forgiveness does not mean that you trust the person again. You might not ever trust that person again. They might not be a trustworthy person. Trust has to be earned. Trust has to be rebuilt. So again, you can forgive someone without reconciling with them. You can forgive someone without trusting them again. You might be open to letting them rebuild that trust, but trust has to be earned by the offender if they wish to continue or reconcile a relationship with you. I think forgiveness is a lot like grieving. Not too long ago, I lost someone very close to me, my grandma. And I don't know if you've ever lost someone close to you, someone that you'd give anything to have one more day with. If you have, what do you remember about that process of grieving? For me, when I lost my grandma, who functioned very much like a mother in my life, very close to me, for the first few weeks after her passing, I could not function because the pain of the loss was just ever present. It was so palpable. It was right in my face, in the front of my mind all the time. I thought about her and I thought about her sudden and unexpected passing like every minute of every day. The pain was overwhelming. I couldn't work, I couldn't focus. But as I began to walk through that grieving process, I started to be able to function again. And I it was because the thought was not ever present. It became a little more distant. It became a little more in the back of my mind. And I felt bad about that because I felt like I was letting her slip into the past and I didn't want her to be in my past. I wanted her to be in my present. I didn't want to let go. And when I think about her now, you know what? It still hurts. Even as I talk about it right now, it still hurts. I still cry sometimes when I think about her. I still grieve. And the same is true about forgiveness. When you let hard things slip into the past, it's okay to let them go. It's okay to let them slip into the past. You don't have to keep holding on to it. Keep holding on to it to make sure it doesn't happen again, to make sure they know, to make sure you protect yourself. You can let it go. Because if you keep thinking about it all the time, you won't be functioning well. You won't be living unhindered. You won't be happy. You won't be free. So you need to grieve that thing and you need to let it go. You can have your backpack or you can have peace, but you can't have both. All right, great. So you have an idea of what forgiveness is and what it is not. And hopefully you've had some aha moments. But then the next question I always get from people is, okay, but how do I do it? Or what do I do? Well, when we get hurt, sometimes we tend to withdraw in pain. We recoil and we start to try to control things. We want to control our situation. We want to keep ourselves from being hurt again. It's a protective mechanism. It's natural. I have celiac disease, which means that I cannot eat gluten. And if I do, I have a lot of pain. It hurts really bad. And then I withdraw in pain and I strive to control my environment to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? I'm going to make sure that I do not get gluten, which means I'm going to control things. I'm going to have the restaurants do certain things. I'm going to not let friends and family cook for me because they don't understand what has gluten and what doesn't, and they accidentally gluten me. So I try to control my environment to prevent that pain from happening again. That's just normal. That's just natural. And this works pretty well when it comes to what I'm eating. But when we are hurt emotionally by someone, we try to control how people treat us. We want the person to make our future feel fixed so that we can let go. Like they have to make it better first. Like they have to fix what they've done or we're not going to be able to let go. But the truth is that we're never going to control them enough to find that kind of healing. You don't have that kind of control over people. And your withdrawal and your efforts to control are not bringing you happiness. We withdraw and we say, if I just pull away, I'll be okay. If I just keep up these walls, I'll be safe. Yeah, you'll be totally safe and totally alone. Loneliness has never brought you health. Refusing to trust again, to believe again, to hope again, to love again, to dream again has never brought you happiness and wholeness in your life. Guardedness, walls, not being vulnerable, that's not what brings us happiness because that's not what brings us connection. Instead, fear begins to set in. Fear of hoping, loving, dreaming, trusting. Fear that we're not emotionally safe. And if you catch yourself saying something like, oh, no, I can't do that, I'm just going to get hurt again, then you have to understand that fear has you stuck. And fear is a liar. Aren't you tired? Tired and weary of living in self-protection mode? Tired of being tired? Carrying around that backpack full of resentment is wearing you out. You may even be in despair, doubtful that this relationship can ever work with this person. You withdrew. You tried to control. It's okay. We all do it. But don't you see that it only caused fear, fatigue, and maybe even despair? You thought it was going to be your safe place where you could heal, but it really just kind of made you feel like a failure in that relationship. Set down that backpack. Take a rest. Take a load off. Are you so hung up on your past that you'd be willing to forfeit your future? Maybe you say, no, I want to let it go. I do, but I just can't. They don't understand what they did to me. They haven't apologized. They haven't changed. Nothing is different. How could I possibly move forward? When we get hurt, we often expect the other person to fix our wounds, and we're waiting. We're just waiting for them to say the right thing. It's going to make it feel better. We want them to really, really get it. We want them to apologize. We want them to feel the depth of how they've affected us. But the plain, simple truth that none of us really want to hear is that they cannot fix our hurt. Nothing they do is actually going to take away that pain of what happened. It's not their responsibility to take away this feeling from you. Believe it or not, it's your responsibility. I know, it sucks. It's totally unfair. It's like they caused it. They should clean it up, right? That's what we're taught. If somebody makes a mess, then they should come clean their mess up. But guess what? They might not. And then what? If somebody spills a cup of milk on your bed and they never come clean it up, are you just going to sleep in the bed the way it is forever? Smell rotten milk every night? Or are you going to take it upon yourself to say, well, they're not cleaning it up and I'm not living like this, so I'm going to have to change the sheets, buy a new mattress, whatever you have to do. It's your responsibility. If you are waiting for that person to adequately pay for what they've done to you, good luck. Because you are probably never going to feel like they really get it or they really paid enough. If you do, great, that makes forgiveness easy, but we all know that's often not how things go. Your healing cannot be based on whether or not they have suffered adequately. Your healing is up to you. Choose to let it go so that you can be healed. You can't change your experience, but you can choose how that experience affects you. We keep wanting our past to fix itself before we move forward. But you can't change the past. You cannot change the past, but you can let it be a platform for your future. That's why I think the most powerful thing you can ever say is, I've decided. I've decided to forgive. I've decided to let go. I've decided that I am not going to let people's past actions dictate the promises of God for my future. I'm taking back the power. And until you decide that you are tired of trying to change what was, you're going to be hung up on yesterday and you're never going to discover the tomorrow that God has for you. You're never going to truly walk unhindered. The story of what happened is just going to keep replaying in your head. And that's the story you're going to hear instead of the story of what's to come. The best may still be to come, but you can't see that because you're focused on the past. Think of the story of what's to come, not the story of what was. Let's focus on the future. You can have your backpack or you can have peace, but you can't have both. Okay, so another question I get from people is, well, how do I know if I've actually forgiven them? I mean, I think I have, I feel like I have, but I'm still hurting, and it's just hard to tell if I've forgiven them. So let me give you some signs to look for. Even after you've forgiven someone, you're still going to be triggered from time to time. Like the memory of that hurt is still going to come to your mind. Something is going to remind you of it. That's normal. And when it does, like I said, I want you to just take that thought captive and I want you to say, no, I have left this outside. I have left this in the past. I have put this behind me and I'm going to choose not to think about this. I'm going to choose to let it go again. If you're able to do that, you're on the right path to forgiving. Another sign that you're on the road to forgiveness is that you no longer feel the need to present your hurts to everyone who will listen. You don't need to rehash it over dinner with friends. You don't need to tell that person again how they hurt you. You no longer want to make them feel bad for what they did. You no longer want other people to think badly of them. You're not telling your victim story anymore. You don't need to present proof of your victimhood because you've forgiven it. You've let it go. You've moved on. Once you can do that, that's a good sign that you have forgiven. And lastly, you may be able to feel empathy for the person that hurt you. And if you can do that, you've probably forgiven them. This is a good sign because you see, hurt people all the time. You were hurt by someone probably because they were hurt by someone. They're acting out of their own pain. Now that they've hurt you, you can choose to be a hurt person that hurts people, or you can choose to be a healed person that isn't passing on that hurt. There's a name for this destructive cycle. It's called kick the cat syndrome. For example, say a man comes home from work. He's had a hard day at work. So he comes home and he yells at his wife about something that's very inconsequential. And in turn, now she's in a bad mood. And so she gets snappy with her son. And then the child is mad. So he kicks the cat. And the cat says, meow, what did I do? It all started when the dad had a rough day at work and his hurt led to somebody else's hurt, led to somebody else's hurt, led to somebody else's hurt until the cat got hurt. And the cat didn't even do anything. We tend to pass on our hurt. We tend to pass on our frustrations. So if you can start to see, I think they were this way to me because of their hurt and have empathy for them, then you've probably forgiven them. In the Bible, in Philippians chapter 3, Paul says, "But one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." Forgiveness is instant, but healing is a process. And until you decide to forgive, you haven't even started that process. Until you decide to move forward, you're always going to be living in yesterday's pain. If you really want to be free, your only option is to forfeit your right to be hung up on yesterday. Forfeit your right to quit. Forfeit your right to be a victim. It might be a long, arduous process, but you have to decide to strain forward to what lies ahead and forget what lies behind, refusing to be defined by it anymore. Beth Hunter on her site Forgive and Live has developed a great analogy for the process of forgiveness, and I'd like to read it to you. She says, suppose you were at home and got offended by someone. They hurt you. You wanted to get away from the hurt as fast and as far as possible. So you jump in your car and you start driving. As you drive, you replay the offense in your head and your heart continues to hurt. After a while, you get a little lonely and you see a hitchhiker on the side of the road. He's very clean cut, dressed in a business suit, and you think to yourself, his car probably just broke down, his cell phone died, and he's just trying to get to the next exit. He looks safe enough. I'll give him a ride. So you stop and you let the guy in, and immediately he asks, "What's wrong? You look very upset." Now you have a sympathetic ear, so you tell your story from start to finish in full detail. He listens intently, asking questions at just the right time to help you vent your emotions. At the end, he says, "I can't believe anyone would treat you that way. You should never take that from anyone." Now you feel validated and exhausted from your emotional catharsis and you just want to take a nap, but you don't want to stop the car. So you ask your new best friend to drive while you climb in the back seat and immediately fall asleep. When you wake up feeling rested and refreshed, you look around and you discover that there are other people in your car, people you did not invite, people who don't look as clean cut as your new best friend. You also see that you're in a part of town that you never intended to enter. It has a reputation of being sketchy and dangerous. You turn to your best friend and ask, "Who are these people? How did they get in the car? Where are we? And give me back my keys." Your new best friend looks back with a sly grin and says, "Let me introduce you to my friends. This is depression. This is resentment. This is bitterness. And this is revenge. By the way, my name is unforgiveness. These are my friends. You invited me in and gave me your keys, and now this is my car, and I'll take you wherever I want to go." Unforgiveness speeds up and drives through the dangerous part of town. He takes you over mountains, through valleys, through deserts, and over rivers. You are completely at his mercy, of which he has little. However, you do have a choice. You can decide to get out of the car and begin the long walk home, back through all the terrain that you've traveled through. When you get out of the car, you're making a choice to forgive. The journey home is the process of forgiveness. This process can be quick or lengthy depending on how long you've been traveling with unforgiveness and how deep the hurt is. Oftentimes, when you get out of the car, unforgiveness will trail you. He will tempt you to get back in the car. If you're walking through the desert, unforgiveness will say, "Come back in. I have a nice cold lemonade. I have air conditioning. You can rest in here." Or if you're on a cold, snowy mountain, he'll tempt you with, "I have hot chocolate and a nice warm blanket. Come on back with me." And if you should give in to that temptation, as soon as you get in the car and get settled, unforgiveness will take off again and continue taking you wherever he wants to go. No matter how many times you get back in the car, you can always choose to get out and begin the journey home. One of my favorite Bible verses is Isaiah 43:18 and 19. It says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." It took me a lot of years to realize that that verse was talking about forgiveness. We have to let go of the past in order to have a new thing. And a new thing can spring up out of something that is currently a wilderness, a wasteland, or in some translations, a desert. Do you have a relationship that is a desert, a wasteland? If you want any chance of water springing forth from that desert again, then you have to let go of the past. You can't have a new thing while you're still holding on to the old thing. So let's exchange the old for a new. You can have your backpack, or you can have peace, but you can't have both. I'm not judging your resistance to forgiveness. I have the same resistance. I've been through this. That's the only way I'm able to talk to you about it because I've been on this journey. I've been in the car with unforgiveness and I've had to get out. I've had to make the long journey back more than once. I have had times where I stayed stuck in my fear. And if I hadn't gotten out, I wouldn't be able to help you or anyone else, and neither will you. So I ask you today to decide to let go of unforgiveness, to get out of the car, so to speak. Acknowledge that it has no role and the life that you want moving forward. If you want additional help, I highly recommend reading a book called Forgiving What You Can't Forget by Lisa Turkhurst. That was very helpful in my journey. And there are YouTube videos that go along with that take things further. I will try to remember to link it in the notes of this episode. Let me know in the comments who you need to forgive and what you're going to do about it. I'd love to hear. And don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't.